everyone. My name is Noah Arthur. I'm a member of AFB, and this session is a real projects session. I'm just going to host. Well, I'm just going to go through the agenda today. So what we're going to be doing and how long it will take for us to go through everything. So first, I'll just do a quick introduction on the session and what we're going to be going through, and then the next part would be we have our guest speaker who will be speaking about net zero, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A session, and then we'll have some closing remarks from everyone, and then we'll close the event. So first and foremost, welcome again. Welcome to AFB England's real projects event. Will be AFB, just if any of you don't know, AFB is a not-for-profit organization. We have many different events. Today's event is the real projects event, where we have an amazing guest speaker to talk to you about a topic for today. The topic of today is about achieving net zero, and how do you play your part. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite our speaker, Blessing Danha, to speak to us about net zero.
Right, so welcome to this webinar. My name is Blessing Danha, and I am going to be presenting today's webinar on net zero and how you can play your part in it. So for today's agenda, we're going to go through, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll have some context setting, just so that you understand a little bit more about why net zero is important. But most importantly, we're going to go into how you can get involved, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So a little bit about me. I'm a civil engineer by background. Career spans from around about 2006 to now. As you can see on my very simple timeline, I've done almost anything and everything in the process. Started my career working in construction for Kia London, and it was such an interesting and exciting time, whereby I was designing and building pretty much anything and everything, which was hospitals, schools. In fact, the other day, I went past one of the buildings by Bank Station that I helped build. After I did my stint at Kia London, I went over to work at Network Rail High Speed, which is, again, one of my more memorable projects that I worked on was through Network Rail High Speed. So I don't know how many of you ever go past St Pancras International Station. So one of the projects that I did was, it's called Terrace Wires. So if you ever Google that, so you have the other side where you have the large kissing couple, and above that, they do public artwork. And I absolutely loved being in charge of that project, because it combined everything that I absolutely love. So you had engineering, you had some artwork, you had things to do with the public and customer experience, pretty much everything. So it was working with artists. I think the latest one pre-COVID was Tracy Emin. So you work with them, it's a heritage building, you're hanging something on the trusses, and you have to install the whole process in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. St Pancras is both a hotel and you've got residents there. So absolutely enjoyed my time there. And whilst I was with Network Rail High Speed, I got chartered, because it was always really important for me to get my professional qualification. And then after that, one of the things that I remember everybody always saying was, oh, engineers don't understand money. So I went to work at AECOM doing transaction advisory. So that was looking at funding for projects. PPPs were quite, in vogue at the time. So your PFI staff looking into doing due diligence reports before investors could invest into an asset, helping them build their portfolio, helping them think about when to sell, etc. So that was all really exciting time. And whilst I was there, I was actually really happy. there was an unbelievable experience, opportunity that came up to go work in the Middle East. And I jumped at the chance because I'd always wanted to work in the Middle East. So I went to Qatar with WSP. I think I moved with Parsons Brinckerhoff at the time, who then were acquired by WSP. That's why it's WSP there. And again, I absolutely loved it. So the work that I did there, that was the beginning of me doing, consulting advisory work. So I worked in a PMO on the Qatar Rail Development Programme. It was a £25 billion programme, all about what the Qatari government were trying to do in terms of building the Doha Metro, getting ready for the World Cup, which is now next year. And at the time, it seemed like it was so far away. The role that I did there was a reporting role. So literally getting all the data. There was so much data. I'd never dealt with that much Excel in my life. So we're working directly for the managing director and producing reports for FIFA, you name it, forecasting, because it was really important to make sure that it was a 7-year program. Are they going to hit it? Their milestones, is it on budget? All of that stuff, and highly pressured, but interesting. And also one of the beauties of being in the Middle East, it meant I got to travel a lot, suddenly to go to some of the countries that you wouldn't dream of going from the UK. It was just a 3-hour journey. So that was okay. And then after that, as it sometimes happens, not always, when you've worked overseas, I think when you speak to some of your mates who've worked overseas, the transition back, it's not always easy to find, to match a role within the same company in your host country. So I did struggle a little bit for WSP to find me a space in London, which matched some of the work that I was doing in Qatar. Luckily, AECOM had an exactly similar team and setup. So I went back to AECOM. I have got lots of friends there. Some of them I still keep in touch with them. One of my best friends I met at AECOM. So I did that. And the work that I was doing at AECOM was continuing with that major programs advisory. I did some work for the Ministry of Justice looking into the re-procurement of their facilities management contracts, not necessarily engineering, but very much about how do you put structure and rigor around the large programs and transformations. And it was during my time that I was there, a recruiter just contacted me who I'd known for a while and said, oh, there's one of a lady that you've got in connections in LinkedIn connections in common, that's the right expression, has now taken over KPMG Major Projects Advisory, and her name is Sue Kershaw. Do you want to work for her? And I jumped at the chance because I'd known Sue for about 10 years, and she was a sort of like a distant mentor, if you want to call it that, somebody that you watch from a distance. I'd worked with her in the industry and I really admired her. And also I think it was at a time when I thought, I think I'm ready to go work for a female boss, because I've never had that before. And as a feminist, it was a huge thing. I'd helped set up our WSP Women's Network in Qatar. And right now it's massive. It's like an award-winning, women's network that I helped set up. So I really wanted to do that. So I joined KPMG in their infrastructure advisory group, which at the time was just, I think, shy of 100 people. By the time I left, it had grown to close to 200. And so that was a team that sat within deal advisory, providing all sorts of consulting services and advisory services to public and private sector clients in infrastructure. So the work that I did, some of the stuff that I did was helped with the Rhodes investment strategy. I don't know how many, I'm going to make an assumption that none of you know about this. So if you think about how funding for public infrastructure or perhaps funding from government is arranged, it comes in cycles. So for Highways England, it comes in 5-year cycles. And so I was in charge of, helping the DFT, Highways England, ORR and Treasury get together and negotiate this deal and including what are some of the performance metrics that needed to be there in securing this, I think it was £20 billion funding envelope from Treasury to Highways England. So that's the types of work that I then started doing, and working within that environment, being stationed within the DFT, it meant I really understood the sort of like the interplays between politics and the work that we do as engineers. And that's going to be the theme of a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today. And whilst I was at KPMG, it's always been really important for me to, to have skin in the game. And so I made sure that I kept in touch with my engineering community. So I put myself forward, was nominated onto the ICE Council, because I'd always done work around the ICE. So I did lots of work with the GNS committee in London. And then afterwards, I felt I was a bit more strategic and more structured by the time I got to KPMG in terms of what I wanted for my career. So that's why I was like, okay, I really want to do that, because I feel I've got sufficient, experience now that I have a voice to add. There's lots of things that I want to debate about how the institution should be running, what we need to be doing as an industry. So I'll put myself forward for that. And then at the same time was nominated onto the KPMG Global Infrastructure Strategy Board. So that was looking at how KPMG infrastructure across the world what it needs to be focusing on, what are its priority areas. And again, that was all part of leading me towards to where I am at the moment. And last year, no, it's not last year, oh my God, it is last year, yeah. Because of the work that I do with the ICE, I spoke at the Labour Party conference. This was all to do with thinking about what does infrastructure mean. That was ahead of the autumn spending review. So thinking about what the government needs to be doing in terms of its commitment, what does levelling up mean, what do we need to do? And those are some of the stuff that I really love. And you'll find a key theme of politics throughout my, my presentation. And then after that, I joined Ankura about 3 months ago. That was, again, a deliberate move, because I had really wanted to start doing bespoke one-on-one advisory work, which is a lot of the work that we do now, because you get to a point where you feel like, I think I can go and stand on my own 2 feet and do this. And I also wanted to come and develop this proposition around ESG and net zero. So it's not all work, there is play, okay? So I thought I'd just share some of the photos, to just give you a little window into who I am as a person. So I absolutely love a jungle of a house, okay? Those are some of the orchids that I have in the house. I think for anybody on the call who's ever looked after orchids, they need love, and I like things that need love. That was, so the photo in the middle, that's me cycling. I did a cycle ride for charity. We went from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana. We did that for a week, cycling about 7-8 hours a day. And that was for charity. And that's some of the stuff that I really love. And the final picture, for if there's anybody on the call who knows me, for me, food is love, okay? I like nothing better than going to my favorite restaurants and sitting down, eating with friends, having some good food, some good wine. So there is, some play, okay? It's not all work. So let's go into the firm that I now work for. I thought I'd spend some time just letting you know a little bit about Ankura. So they are an advisory firm. We are headquartered out of America, and it's 1,500 people strong at the moment in about 115 countries. It focuses on advisory work. Pardon. And as recent as 2 months ago, we opened our latest office in Germany. So we have UK presence, and I'm part of that team trying to develop that. And the work that we do out of the UK, we focus on UK, Europe, and Middle East. Some of the services that we offer in Ankura, we do pretty much most of what all the big four do. Your sort of like risk compliance, turnaround and restructuring, strategy transformation. That's a load of the work that we do. And in London, I work for the construction disputes and advisory part of our business, which has got about 200 people strong. and I sit under the Capital Projects Advisory team. So we have another group within London who look after the quantum delay analysis, and it's made up of economists, engineers, quantity surveyors, and that's pretty much a flavour of the company that I work for. Now, on to net zero, which is why you're all here. I thought, apologies for anybody on the call who has a bit more advanced knowledge, but I wanted to spend some time just for the benefit of some of the students or some of the people who are new to the area. I wanted to spend some time talking about just the basics of what does it all mean for anybody who doesn't know. So we'll start with a basic definition, okay? So what is net zero? You've probably read about it, you've heard about it. It's effectively achieving the balance between the carbon that's emitted into the atmosphere and the carbon that's removed from it. That's essentially it. And you probably have heard people talk about scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, because there's different categories within those emissions that are, the carbon that's emitted. So you've got your scope 1 stuff, which is what your companies is ultimately responsible for. They control it, things like how much gas they use, heating, etc. And then you've got scope 2, which is from like electricity purchased and used by a company, for example. And then everything else comes under scope 3, which is stuff that's indirect. You don't really control it. So things like, how your employees travel to work, you won't find that being, measured at the moment. And so to get to net zero, you need to have addressed scope 1, scope 2, and some of scope 3. That's still, a work in progress. In 2019, the UK became the first country to actually legislate towards net zero. And it was enshrined in law then, which was a massive step. And as somebody who'd always worked in the engineering field, I knew all about the Millennium Development Goals, and then they moved to be Sustainable Development Goals. To hear that for me was just like, okay, this is brilliant. So what am I going to do? What does that mean for me? And at the time I was at KPMG and I was thinking, how can we incorporate this? How are we going to help our clients? At the bottom there, I've included a timeline just to give you a flavour of how we've got to where we are and where we're trying to get to. So it all started in 2015 at the Paris Agreement. Some of you may have heard of it because I think when Trump was in power, he, got America out of the Paris Agreement, and Biden's, got America back in again. And so that might have been the first time that some of the people, some of you may have heard of that, or you already knew about that, which is effectively is a global framework, which was all about how do we minimize the impacts that we are having as a society on the world. And that's what it was. And that was during COP21. And then, as I've already said, moving along the timeline, in 2019, the UK enshrined in law net zero, which is where we are now, and that's what everybody's working towards. By the end of this year, we're going to have COP26, which should have happened last year, but because of COVID, it got pushed back to this year. And that's all about assessing progress towards some of the actions that would have been agreed during the Paris Agreement. And on the road to net zero to 2050, there's lots of different things that you'll hear that the government's planned. One of them, I think a few months ago, they said that, they made an announcement that there's going to be a ban on, combustion engine sales of pretty much, petrol and diesel cars. It's a two-phased approach, like everything. Nobody ever just does, goes cold turkey on these things. And so that's some of the things that the government's doing. On the road to net zero, as a nation, we've committed to 2050. Scotland are going to do that by 2045. And I believe Wales, they're at like 95% by 2050, but it all adds up. So thinking about moving forward, I got a mini statement from the G7 communique, which was issued I think the G7, for those of you tuning in from the UK, that was in Cornwall, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And what it effectively came out of that was, that they saw that 2021 was a turning point for our planet. Pretty much almost saying that, we are at that, existential crisis point, which might sound kind of like scaremongering or doomsmongering, but that's essentially where we are. This is now the most important issue for, your CEOs, for boards, for companies that you work for. It is the number one thing that everybody is working towards. So why am I here in that case? For me, representation matters. So if you have a look on there, it tells you that the total carbon dioxide emissions for the UK, as you can see, it's made up of emissions from the energy sector, the transport sector, residential, industrial and non-infrastructure. And what that tells you is it needs everybody to play a role. There isn't a particular sector that's going to solve this by itself at all. Everybody has to get involved. Everyone has a role to play. And as part of the AFBE, for me, there's no point talking about, problems of yesteryear. I think we need to be making sure that as a community, we're building a good pipeline of future leaders who are going to be at the table in another 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, talking about this stuff. And it starts today. If we're going to make sure that when some of this stuff starts to become serious, it already is serious, but it's going to get more serious. We have, a diverse range of voices around the table. We've got Black and brown people around the table. We've got LGBTQ. We've got people from different backgrounds, and it's really important, which is one of the reasons why, yes, it's important. One of the reasons why I'm here, because I want to make sure that you are aware of what's going on out there. And if it's something that appeals to you, you can see how you can make this applicable to your career. You can make this part of where you're going. So on how you can get involved then, I thought I would split that into 3 segments. So talking about what you can do in your day job, then talking about some of the stuff that you can do around business development and what you can do outside, which is what I've called the industry groups. So what do I do then in my day-to-day job? So effectively, I'm helping clients on that transition to net zero. So this is clients in the public sector, clients in delivery organizations, regulators, the supply chain, and the private sector. I've got another slide, which I'm going to show you quickly, because that will help explain some of that, to frame and put in context what I'm talking about here. And we'll come back to this one in a minute. So this slide here, okay, I've got two screens. I have to make sure that I'm looking at the right one with the camera. So this slide here, it's meant to help you understand how things go from legislation and the different layers that we have, and how you can play a role, what you can possibly do, where the opportunities are, and the parameters of influence, or what you can do within the organization that you work for. So you've got the 2 arrows either side, signaling that you do need signal from the government. As I said, that announcement that they made about the ban on diesel cars and petrol cars by 2030, that's that type of signal, because then it tells the market what's going to happen. It gets everybody ready, and people know that, okay, if I'm Volkswagen, if I'm Ford, this is where we're going as the UK. What does that mean for me? What do I need to do? What capacity do I need within my organization to be able to meet that challenge? But that signal from government has to be consistent, so that you give people that confidence and assurance that you're not going to change your mind. So it's really important as well. And then on the other side, once you get that signal, it drives that innovation, but that innovation does need funding, because some of these technologies, some of the things that could be done. That's why you have organizations like, BAYS and Innovation UK. You do need to invest, in the technologies and the solutions. So just going through the slide then. So you have the government sets the legislation, and then you've got the different government departments. You've got your DFT, you've got DEFRA, you've got all sorts, okay? I thought would focus on your sort of like regulated delivery organizations and companies, because that will really help you understand how, legislation flows, where you can play your part, and how each layer, adds to the bigger piece, and which part of the puzzle you may wish to play in. So if you come down, a vehicle for the government to do most things is through regulation. Okay, so you've got your regulated companies or delivery bodies. So you've got private and public. So private, like water companies, your Thames Water, that's a private company, but it's regulated. On the public side, you've got Highways England, you've got Network Rail that are publicly funded, and they're also regulated. So to create that burning platform, you need to have a situation whereby the license agreement to some of these organizations, they have to comply with regulations, and through regulations you get performance metrics put in there to kind of say, right, you're Miss Highways England, or Miss Highways England, what are you going to do about net zero? What are you going to do about safety, road safety? What are you going to do about this? And that gets embedded into their license agreement, into their performance metrics, into the funding that they get. And equally on the other side, where you've got the private sector, same mechanisms are put into their license agreements. And so that's a good way of making sure that whatever legislation, things that the government wants to achieve, it gets driven down that way. So once it gets to Highways England, once it gets to the water companies, BT, your energy companies, then they start to think, right, we have this obligation, we get actually measured against these targets. What do we need to do? But it's driven down the supply chain, okay? That's where you've got your contractors, your designers, your educational institutions, your SMEs. And what's the route for that? It's through the procurement mechanism. So you'll have maybe, Network Rail insisting that, you have to cut your carbon emissions by X number. That's them trying to make sure that they can also meet their obligation. So that's how the whole cycle works. If you try to understand, and knowing that, it helps you think about where are you, having the greatest impact and influence in your career, or where do you want to play? Okay, some people are really good at research and development because they're technical people, and that's great, but you need those signals, and then you need to be applying for some of that funding. And then you start to apply for that funding because you know that, Thames Water, you've come up with this brilliant idea that you think is going to, solve all the problems that, Thames Water is having. But once they know that they've got a problem, what's going on, that's how the whole system kind of works. And I hope by just showing you that, it helps you understand the how the chain, I don't want to call it chain of command, but it's pretty much how it works, so that you can see how we're going to get to net zero, and why people and the public sector and the private sector needs to work together, and why also you constantly see Mark Carney on the news putting pressure on the government, because they've set something in law for 2050, which means they need to give enough guidance for everybody to be able to adapt and get on the journey to transformation. So that's how the whole thing works. And I've got the local authority there as well, and your combined authorities. So, your Mayor of London, they also set their own, what they want to do, the air quality in London. That then means the organizations that operate within London, they need to work to that. So those are the different players and how everything impacts and influences each other and how it all works together. So if I go back then to this slide, so hopefully with some of that context, it will help you understand where I work and how, the zone that I operate in. And then you can also understand the zone that you work in within your organization, or where you might want to take your career to. So the work that I do then, most of the time, is very much about that high level strategy stuff. So it's very much front end. So we're supporting your government departments, we're supporting some of these big delivery bodies in terms of what they need to do to come up with their strategies. How do they transition? What is realistic for them to be able to achieve? So before you publicly make statements out there about how you're going to be net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050, you kind of need to know the baseline of where you are. And so some of the work that we do is that benchmarking, baselining, really understanding, so that we can help you with the roadmap to get you to where you need to get to, and then come up with the a suitable framework for how are you going to get to that position, what are you going to do. And just the other day, I had to get in touch with one of my friends who is a structural engineer, because I'm helping one of our clients think about their carbon portfolio. So I needed to understand what are some of the sort of the advances in concrete and cement and steel, so that I can actually see, is it feasible what they're saying they're going to do, before I start playing around with all the different scenarios in my model. And then you get to understand where things are going, and you get to understand how the system works as well. Because if you think, for example, some of the cement replacement stuff like GGBS, that's a byproduct from steel. So if people are saying, let's eliminate steel, that means you're gonna have to have another development or some advances in that cement replacement space, because you won't be able to get your GGBS. And you're balancing all of that, and you're thinking, so what's going to happen then if this moves and then the other moves? What does that mean to the balance of your portfolio? How much is it going to cost you in the long run? So that's the kind of work that I'm doing at the moment in net zero. And also on the other side, helping clients with raising sustainability bonds for some of the the work that they're doing. And again, to be able to do that, you need to know the baseline. You need to then commit to doing a strategy. What's within your strategy? How are you going to report against that? So you start to go into the reporting side of things. How are you going to assure that? How, if you're in a private company, what does your shareholders want? And that's a lot of the work that I do, looking at scenarios, implementation risk. And it's a people and culture thing. How do you take everybody on this journey within your organization? How are you going to set the governance to be able to make the decisions around what to invest in? Which are the low-hanging fruits? How do you prioritize what you do within your portfolio of stuff to get you there? So that's the kind of stuff that I do. Moving on to the next one, I think I've spoken a little bit too long about that. So moving on to the other bit that I do, which is business development. So business development doesn't necessarily mean you're selling stuff. It's pretty much, what are you doing to contribute towards your company's growth strategy? Whether you work for AECOM, WSP, whoever, what are you doing to contribute towards that? Okay, so some of the work knowing, so this is going back to 2019, after net zero had been enshrined in law, I knew that, okay, we need to do something. So I actually started within our infrastructure advisory group at KPMG, working really hard and pushing to asking the hard questions like, what are we going to do? How does this work? And it was a really useful exercise for me, because you have to always understand the parameters that you're functioning in. You have to understand how your company, the company that you work for, how does it make money? Because again, that helps you think about the solutions and what you can possibly the art of the possible, what's possible. So if you work for the government, you're all about policy. If you work for, one of the big four, it's about what are the services that we're providing to our clients? What's going to make somebody want to, write that check for, I don't know, £50,000, £100,000? What are you going to sell them? What does it look like? And so you need to start thinking in terms of that. If you work for a design organization, what does it mean for us to gain efficiencies? What does it mean for us to sweat the assets? Because it's always about, can you reduce? Can you reuse? Can you find efficiencies? What does that mean? If you're working in research and development, if you work for an educational institution, what do we need to be teaching? What do we need to change about our curriculum? So I think understanding the parameters and the framework within you, where you operate, helps you, think about how best you can focus your energies. So I started supporting, I did 50-50. I took on a role to spend 50% of my time doing the KPMG net zero proposition for the infrastructure, government and health business, because that was really important for me to actually get out there and be thinking about, what are we going to offer to our clients? Who are our clients? What do they want? What does it look like? And with that, when I then moved, it was work that I wanted to carry on doing. And so within Ankura, I am doing a similar role, developing our ESG and net zero proposition. I'm working with our US colleagues because they're slightly behind in the US, and so I'm working with them on their, on the corporate ESG. So this is almost like an internal role as well. And the corporate ESG, for anybody who doesn't know what ESG is looking at environmental, social, and governance. This is all about ethical and responsible investments, and how you run your business, how you work within the communities that you operate in, how you govern yourself. And at the moment in the US, the S is very, very strong. It's no surprise after what happened with George Floyd that businesses, companies, they're wondering about the inequalities, and then COVID as well. It's short, it's like there's a spotlight on the S part in terms of how businesses operate, and that's some of the stuff that I'm helping them with. In the UK, for anybody who's ever done public sector procurement, again, going back to that other picture, at the moment, if you are doing bids for any public sector procurement, 10% of the marks are dedicated to social value, which means the S within the ESG is becoming more prominent. So the impact on the communities that you operate in, how you treat your people, is becoming so and so important. And so that's some of the stuff that I'm doing as well. So what can you do then within the business development side, no matter who you are on this call? So it starts with your goal setting. Everybody sets goals, whether you're a student, whether you're a professional. It's always really important to make sure that your goals are aligned with your corporate strategy and your growth strategy for the company or the team that you work in. So if you're interested in net zero, really try to understand what your boss thinks of it, what your team thinks of it, what your company thinks of it, where they're going with that, so that you can really align with them, so that you're not spending so much energy on stuff that no one's really going to appreciate because it's not yet on their radar. They're not thinking about it. So you need to make sure that you're aligned and find other people that you can work with so that you can really support that. And you put that as part of your performance goals at the end of the year. You could say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and that's all part of the business development, and you can demonstrate that. And then speaking with clients, it's all about listening about what are your clients worried about? What does it mean? How can you help them? How can you unpack some of their thoughts? Everybody knows they have to do something, but they don't really know what it is that they're going to do. So what's the role that you can play in that, regardless of where within that chain of, the life cycle of an asset where you sit, there is something that you can do for your clients in that space. And then building networks, that's really important because it's both on a personal and professional level. So on a personal level, I think if you're going to be coming up with any solutions, if you're going to be understanding what's going on out there. You need to have your mentors, you need to have your challenge panels. I have those. So whenever I come up with something and I'm thinking, I think this could be a good proposition, there are people that I go to and test some of this with, to say, I know that you work for one of these companies. I know that you work for an energy company. I know that you work for this. I really want to test this with you. Is it crazy? Is it something that could work within your organization? So you need to test your ideas. If you've got an idea, don't keep it to yourself. Okay. I mean, within reason, it depends on what that idea is, but it's always a good idea to share with people so that the sooner somebody tells you that, okay, this is a bit rubbish, or you've missed this, blind spots, the better. Okay. And then from a professional side of things, why you need to build your networks, going back to that donut that I shared earlier, this is going to require everybody and different people to solve it, which means me as Blessing, who works for Ankura, we don't have all the capabilities within our in-house team to be able to do that, which means we need to be partnering up with some of those boutique companies who specialize in maybe biodiversity, those boutique companies that specialize in something that we don't do. So you need to actually know who are the potential people that you can partner up with to support your clients. And then bid strategies, that's a massive thing when you're doing business development. If you're going to be bidding for stuff, you need to understand the size of the pipeline. And how do you understand the size of the pipeline? Is those signals that I spoke about before, getting that signal to make sure that the market is ready. That, okay, the Chancellor has said in his budget statement that they're going to invest £100 billion in infrastructure over the next however many years. Read the fine print in all of that stuff to kind of figure out, to be like, okay, so £100 billion, how much of that is going to my sector? I work in transport. What does that mean? What are they saying? To make sure you really understand, so that you always understand the size of the pie that you're going after, and you're not going to win everything. And so you really need to understand, how big it is and how many times you need to just have a go until something lands. And one of the things about business development is about developing self and others, because things are changing so much. Okay. And I'm pleased to see so many of you here today. That's part of the whole process. You need to learn from others, tell others, teach others. I do the same. And it's part of just making sure that you remain fresh and constant, what's going on. And then finishing off with the industry groups, as I said before, it's really important for me to have my skin in the game, understand what's going on. The work that I do with the ICE, being on council, means I'm right there debating all the latest issues, the things that really matter. I know where the strategy is and what we're doing, and I know areas where I can really have the greatest impact, and I bring that. Equally, I sit on their Finance, Assurance and Risk Committee, and that's helping me understand the risks that the ICE is facing as a business, as a charity. It's no different to any other business. How are they managing their finances? How are they investing? And it's all linked to that whole, are you an ethical, responsible investor? And that's what I bring to them, because I bring some of my industry experience, and then also because I do assurance all the time, I'm well versed with doing managing risks. And so again, being different, being diverse as well, it means around the table when we meet, we've got different voices and everybody's looking at it from a totally different perspective. And so that's what I do. And then, as I mentioned before, in that circle, the energy sector is a massive contributor and also a massive opportunity in helping us to get to where we need to get to. So I realized that I don't really know much about the energy sector. So what did I do? I joined the Women's Utilities Network, and they're fabulous. They're so good because it helped me understand what is going on with hydrogen technology, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. What are some of the latest thinking around carbon capture? And then I bring some of my infrastructure, experience to be like, okay, this is what the clients are doing. This is what some of my clients are thinking. And how far is some of your technology that you're doing around, sustainable fuels. Okay, great. Okay, so what does that mean then for some of my clients? And so it's a sharing community, because again, you can't solve this by yourself. And one of the things that I do within this industry band, which kind of starts to bleed into your business development, you get to go to different things. So tomorrow we've got a lunch with Benedette Kelly, looking at decarbonising transport. And then later on, at the end of, in 2 weeks' time, there's a webinar from the Women's Utilities Network with David Riley. He's from Thames Water. Again, he's going to be talking about what does net zero mean for the water companies. And it's helping me, again, hear from other people, bring something else to the table. And that just keeps everybody understanding what's going on. And then it feeds me, I feed other people. And those are the many different ways that you can get involved. Pick your industry, pick the areas that you're interested in, and think about, what can I do in my day job? How can I improve myself? And what else can I do outside? Because there are not that many roles out there that will specifically say, we're looking for a net zero engineer. It doesn't exist at the moment. And so you have to find opportunities to collect buckets of experience, buckets of skills, that as a collective, you can start to build a picture of, okay, this is who I am. I think I can do this for you. And it's part of that whole thing. So, conscious of time, I'm going to finish off with some resources. So I thought there's a lot out there. This is only like a small drop in the ocean. I quite like Climate Action, their website, because it's really good for like events, news. It helps you, you can sign up for lots of their different webinars and stuff. If you want to continue understanding what other people are doing, there's lots of stuff happening around COP26. Pretty much every organization out there has some sort of like, this is our marketing plan. This is what we're doing towards COP26. This is how we're contributing. And so there's so much. One of the things that I really love, the Wreath lectures. So there's one there from Mark Carney, who's the COP presidency, I think. I'm just going to get that right. So it's a 4-part lecture that he did. That's the final one, which is it's labeled From Climate Crisis to Real Prosperity. It's the 4th one, but you need to listen to all 4 of them. It's coming at it from a financial services perspective. Again, the financing of all of this is a massive part of how we're going to get to net zero. It's such an interesting lecture series. I listen to it every year when they do the Wreath lectures. It's not just about that. There's always something, it's like a deep dive into just a small little pocket of something. It just helps. I listen to that. And then there's the Shaping Zero video that Rachel Skinner did, who's the current president of the ICE. It's fabulous. Okay, it's such a good documentary. I don't think that I see, I'm even calling it a documentary, but it's not a documentary, it's just a video. It's the first one that the ICE did, which honestly, I thought I was watching Planet Earth. I thought I was watching Mr. Attenborough. It's so good in terms of her unpacking the issues, what we need to do as engineers. So you can Google that. It's available on the ICE's website. I've also added a couple of podcasts there. There's one called How to Save a Planet, which just kind of like, it's fun. It's about sustainability, but it gives you a good awareness. So I think if you can read that, it's the latest episode is asking whether recycling is BS. I don't know, but it's interesting to hear the sort of like the argument when they're talking about it. And it just helps you when you see some of those clickbait articles in the news, you can be a bit more informed about some of the issues. So I love what they do. They really break it down into some of the simple things. And then Energy Unplugged, I really love. So it's about the energy sector, and it's interviews with entrepreneurs, with ministers, with all sorts globally. So there'll be people from Australia talking about what they're doing in the coal industry, someone from somewhere else. Again, only if you're interested, okay, please. This is some of the stuff that I listen to. And then I've also thrown in there a policy paper. So last year, I think around about November time, the government published their 10-point plan to a green industrial revolution. Some people think it's not moving fast. Some people think, it's a revolution, but it's really interesting because, again, it's those signals that I spoke about. They publish that. It sets out what needs to be done. And you can read that and you think about your own industry and how that could be applicable, what you could learn from it. And then I've also thrown in a book. There's that one's called All We Can Save. Really like that book. It's a collection of essays and thought pieces around the climate crisis, all not very engineering related, but they just help you build that broader awareness and understanding, and you build that context. And yeah, there's so much more out there, but I just thought if there's anyone on here who's like, I don't really know where to start, this is some of these are some of them. You may not like them, but be interested to hear what you think. And that's the end. And I've got my my details there. Well, I'm not really physically at the office, so don't turn up, I'm not there. Okay. I haven't been to the office for a year, but there's my telephone number there and my email address, so that if you've got any questions, if you want to know more, please do get in touch. Thank you.
Amazing. That was a lot. I learned a lot. Thank you.
So I'm more than happy to take questions on anything that you heard or anything, but nothing to do with any sort of like, I'm not a climate scientist, okay? Please do not ask me about that 1.5 degree. I know nothing about that. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, people put in a couple of questions in the chat. So if I could go through some of those. And it's because you're so engrossed in your presentation, which is good. Focused.
I can't, yeah, it's quite a lot. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, so let me see questions. Okay, so the first one we got is from Patrick. So he said not directly related to tonight's topic. However, as Blessing is on the ICE Council, I have recently looked but cannot find any info regarding numbers for chartered BAME engineers. Are any available? Planning to sit my review in September.
Yes, so there is data available in terms of BAME members of the institution, but it's all based on people actually giving some of that data. So I need to let the ICE know that I'm a Black woman, otherwise I'm going to know. So they are collecting the data, and there is data available. They've done some work into race issues and what they need to be doing, where the gaps are. But yeah, I don't know who asked that question. Please do get in touch, and I can actually get you in touch with the person who's been looking into it. And if there's anything specifically that you're worried about, that you want to talk about, I'm more than happy to help you. We could do a dummy run if you want. So please get in touch.
Great. The next one is from Georgina. A short one. What does COP stand for? You mentioned that earlier in your presentation.
Oh, COP26. It is Conference of Something Parties. My God, you have to Google that, okay? You caught me there, but I do know it. It's like one of those where I forget all the time. But it's a conference from the United Nations, and it's in its 26th year happening. So you often see COP21 was Paris. That was the 21st one. We're at COP26. COP25 was in Madrid, I think. It's a conference, but you can find out.
Okay.
Thank you. Conference of the Parties. Mark has just said. Thank you. I was quite close.
Thanks, Mark, saving us here. The next one is from Nike. She asks, what are the main challenges, if any, that you found when transitioning from an engineering role to a strategic / consultant role? That's a good question.
I think it takes time, if I'm being honest. I think it takes time to understand the different challenges that the clients for some of these organizations, what they're asking for and what they're paying for. So it does take time to be thinking, okay, how do you actually answer this exam question? And that's a massive thing that I find even with people in my team, that ability to really understand what's been asked of you, and then to break it down, to be concise. I think a lot of, I don't want to be stereotyped, but people always say that engineers can't write very well. There is something in that as well. So I think writing becomes so important, because I write reports, I write things that go to government that are in like the political arena. And so your words and what you mean, it becomes even more important. And you do find as well, I struggle with some of the, what I like to call fluffy consulting stuff. I do struggle because everything is an op model, you know, everything is a transformation. And I'm just thinking about what do you actually mean by that, you know, because I'm very much about the detail and the sort of like the substance, you know, without meaning to kind of poo-poo on some of that. It's just like, I don't understand what you mean by that. Oh, right, you meant that then. Okay. So there is a consultant speak that some people are so used to, that I really like for people to be clear and simple, especially when you're writing or when you're speaking. And so you need to work with in teams where other people have also come from an engineering background, and you often get that in these infrastructure advisory type of teams, because I really appreciate somebody who's got that technical background, and I can see where the gaps are, and I can work with you to be, you know, it's quite easy to bridge the gap with somebody. I think it's working for an organization and a team that can help you, because it is really difficult. I remember once when somebody joined the team and we went to a meeting, and I asked her to do the minutes, and you know she did, and then I said, oh, you know, I'll do a review of them and stuff. And I had a review of her minutes and stuff, and I just did what I'd been taught to do at KPMG. I was like, and then I gave it back to her, and I said, oh, I just made some minor comments. She told me later on that it nearly made her cry. She was like, it was all red. And I was just like, but it's just different ways of writing. But I hadn't appreciated that. And so, but we shared such stories. She's one of my best friends now. We shared such stories even with people, and you get people who've been directors at, you know, some of the engineering firms who are like, oh God, I turned up and people, you know, the way that they reviewed my documents made me think I know what I'm doing. But then 2-3 months later, you start to see, okay, that's where you were going. So yeah, that's probably the main thing. I should stop now because I'm waffling.
No, that's good. And to be fair, I didn't realize there'll be such a gap between, you know, engineering and then that's, you know, sort of consultant.
It's not such a big gap. It really
isn't
such a big gap, to be honest.
Okay.
It's not a big gap. You just need to work with people who can invest in you to really help you bridge that gap.
Okay. Yeah. It might be worth us doing another session on on how to bridge that gap. No, I'm joking. But, the next question is
Go on, yeah.
Okay. The next question is okay, it's from Tolu. Do you think we can achieve net zero carbon by 2050? Any opinion on how aviation can play their part?
Oh, right. So I think on the aviation piece, you need, again, those signals. So at the moment, I think, particularly the long haul flights, that sort of like, the low emission or friendly fuel. I was in a webinar, they were talking about this yesterday, and they were saying there has to be a demand created for them to know that the market can take that. And at the moment, there isn't that whole who moves first, understanding that cycle, it's not working very well. And that's what they said, and I'm no expert. Okay, however, I can tell you about where I'm such an expert in when it comes to some of the materials that we use, particularly in infrastructure. And if we're thinking about on a typical project, it's your steel, your concrete, it's your fuel. That would be about 75% of your, carbon emissions. What can you do with that? At the moment, it's about some technical acceptabilities are a challenge, because you've got lots of materials that hasn't been proved, that hasn't been used anywhere else. And to get that to be accepted, that's a challenge. Price volatility is a challenge at the moment. And then you also have issues around carbon credits, offsetting, how much does it cost? It's anybody's guess in terms of where the price of that is going to go. And at the moment, as a market, there's only a finite amount available out there if you're going to offset. I hope we don't get to the point where we're just buying credits. I hope people can really try, because that's the last resort. I really hope people can try to find those efficiencies where you can, reduce, reuse, the usual stuff that people talk about. I think we can get to net zero, but you do need the government, you do need funding, you do need financing, you need innovation funds that actually do work, that support innovators and entrepreneurs. That's required. And a lot of my clients, we're going down that path of actually setting up, innovation funds and thinking about how do you design that innovation fund? How do you deploy those funds to help you solve some of the challenges?
Sorry, this is my question now, just based on that. Speaking on innovation funds, is there a sort of directory where, you can check where certain funds, okay.
Again, it depends on the sector that you work in. Most funds come via BASE, and then it goes to people like, Innovate UK. And so it depends. I think there was a £1 billion innovation fund, which was announced and handed out by about February this year. Lots of local authorities got some of the money. So I think that you can find out by going on government websites, but a lot of the money comes from BASE. So if you go on BASE and try to see that, or you can go direct to the organizations. So TfL have a fund, Network Rail has a fund, High Speed 2 has a fund. All of these large programs have a fund of some sort in terms of what they need to what innovation they need from the community to bridge the gaps. So there's so many, and that's just what we know in the UK. So if you're thinking about globally, I'm sure you can access some funds from, I don't know, the UN or any other organizations.
So any of my entrepreneurs in this chat, there's money out there. So
there is money, and you get to keep your IP as well. So that's really important to know. So have a look.
So there's not going to be anyone that's going to hear your idea and say, oh, this is good, and just take it. And
no, not government, not the government.
Okay, amazing. Let's really run through some of these questions. Okay, so I think this is okay. Yeah, Patrick again. He said he put a comment. I have worked on construction of a CCUS in Norwich. Yep. Okay, which will capture and repurpose 40,000 tons of carbon per year. However, the tide needs to turn by nearer to 100 million tons per year. How do we get there in less than 30 years, given such a slow start?
So last year, BASE, I think they put out a call to get support in identifying carbon capture corridors. So they wanted to develop these almost like clusters for where's the right place to place them, because it does need direct access routes to the sea. And so that was last year. I think that piece of work of identifying where those carbon capture corridors should be, it should be concluded by now. And I'll be looking out to see what's happened as a result. And because that will help me understand, A, where's the next investment going? What are the areas that have been identified as being, feasible for building this? And so have a look. That was commissioned last year by Bays. It should be done by now.
Great. Okay. Just seeing, going through them. A lot of people are saying great presentation, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so this one's from, wait, hold on. Okay, this is from Eleanor. Eleanor says, thanks so much for your presentation. From your international experience, what lessons do you think we should be applying in the UK as we work towards net zero?
Weirdly, the UK is actually, believe it or not, when it comes to research and development, one of the leading countries. So, and if you think about the sort of like the back step that the US took under Trump when it came to some of this, we're slightly ahead. So everybody on this call, you're kind of at an advantage in terms of being able to export UK PLC elsewhere. Some of the lessons that you could learn in what's being done in the UK, where can you take that? You can go to the other side towards America because they're very good, at least they're going to be a good 3-4 years behind where we are, particularly when it comes to this, because it's a highly political subject, because you've got people who just don't believe in, in the whole climate crisis. And so it's a massive battle, and we are also entering a space where traditionally it's time, cost, quality when it comes to measuring performance. You're going to see carbon becoming an almost like fourth dimension. And if you think, people fighting over late running programs, cost overruns, there's going to be stuff coming in the future around people, contractors, designers not meeting some of those carbon commitments that they've put in their designs and what they've done on site, not being able to kind of really follow the whole carbon footprint throughout the whole supply chain. So that's what's going to come from the UK going the other side. What can we learn from the other side? I'm trying to think. I just did a bid for one of the Abu Dhabi investment authorities. There wasn't anything unusual in the bid pack in terms of what they were asking us to do. And so it would appear the world's getting a bit smaller sometimes, because they were asking, us for like an ESG statement, which I was like, okay, I can write that. They were asking for similar things that you would get in a public procurement if you're doing some work with the UK government. So I think most of the stuff, given that a lot of the organizations, and especially if you're going down the route of financial disclosure, carbon reporting, your TCFD, all of that, it doesn't matter where you operate. People are going to be, as an organization, you're going to be required to measure your impact, and so I think you're going to find, more sort of like uniformity in how things are done, because you can't afford to kind of be careless in another country, because that will affect your bottom line of how you're being measured, in particularly around ESG and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Next one. Actually, speaking of that, because I'm just thinking now, because I work in system safety, and for the road industry, that's probably one of the most heavily regulated industries around. And I'm just thinking, but is the government starting to incorporate standards for net zero? Like, for example, railway, you can't, you can't make a change to the railway without, infringing on some standards or something, or when you're designing something, there's a standard there that you have to, use to justify your design. So is, the government writing any standards that when designers are making changes in the designs that, okay, well, they want to build this, there's this standard that they have to abide by. If not, the design can't go through, or there has to be reviews on it. Is there, the government pushing those forward?
So you got British standards, and then you've got general standards that, like for Network Rail, they've got their own standards. Highways England will have its own standards. Some of the companies will have their own. And it goes back to that whole thing, particularly safety critical areas. The construction industry is traditionally quite conservative. So for people to really kind of like be pushing boundaries, you have to do things very differently. But you're operating in an environment where what you do can have consequences on the public safety. And so how do you do safe innovation? It's a tough one to balance. Yeah. So it's the different organizations that own some of those standards that actually need to do the work themselves. Yeah. They need to be working together with the SMEs, the entrepreneurs, the industry, people that can really help them bridge the gap, get the evidence that they need to get the assurance that it makes sense for them to actually change and adapt. But it needs a total shift in how people do things. And when it comes to public safety, it's not the easiest of things to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let me get through some of these comments. There's a whole bunch of comments talking about engineers don't write very well. The struggle is real. That's what Nicola
God,
said.
don't. Oh my God, no, please don't. Okay, I make the odd grammatical error myself as well, so please don't.
Some people are shouting for a creative writing session. Okay. Georgina said, you have made an excellent contribution to developing us all further. Thank you so much, Blessing. It's a nice comment.
I mean, it's really important to just kind of like spell it out in its simplest form. Really understand the organization that you work for. How did they make money? Provided you don't work for the government, because then you're in the land of policy making and writing. Sorry, you have to think about, how does the organization you work for make money? Who are its clients? And then how do I then contribute? Because you can't solve all problems and you can't operate in all spaces. You're sort of like, your ability to influence is limited. So once you get that, you kind of think, right, I'm comfortable here. This is my patch. These are my skills are aligned to where I am. You will thrive. You will really do well. But it's important so that you don't get really frustrated by things that you can't change because they're way outside of your control. I was talking to somebody the other day and I gave them an example of like electric vehicles as an example. There's a reason why not all of us have got, electric vehicles, because the charging infrastructure is not there yet. Highways England doesn't own the land where you've got petrol stations. There's so much. And if you're just, stuck on, I just want to make sure that I eliminate, cars from roads, you have to understand context and you have to understand, so what am I going to do in that piece of the puzzle? Am I going to work for the car manufacturers? Am I going to work for the electric vehicle, the charging infrastructure team? Am I going to work for the government? Because there isn't one organization that can solve the problem. And I think once you get that and you think, actually, I'm most suited to do it here, you will do what you need to do within the bounds of what's possible.
Yeah. So I guess it's more about where do you fit, where can you fit in the puzzle, isn't it? And
yes, exactly. Yeah. And that goes for anything to do with your career. It's where's your most, you just understand the box that you work in. the setup of your company. That's all, not the box that you put yourself in. The setup of your company, how does it operate? And once you get that, you start to understand how it works, where it's going. Are you aligned? Do you want to go with that company where they're going? And if you do, how am I going to help them grow at the same time growing myself?
No, of course. Okay, there's a few more. Okay, this is from K. Are ESGs currently regulated? It seems like a hot topic and a great signal of investment trends.
So you get ESG kind of like investment vehicles, if you want to call it that. Like you get your some people may not want to invest in Shell. Some people may not want to buy anything to do with some of these companies. You can make a decision as an individual or as a company based on the trajectory or the journey that company is going on. And that's how some people are getting around it. And to recognize that everybody is on a journey. I get what you're doing. You've set out the steps that you're going to do as an organization to get to that position. Therefore, I feel really comfortable investing in your company, in your organization. You're being transparent about your data, how you're doing, everything. So for some people, that's enough in terms of how they make their investment decisions. For some people, it's a no-no. I will not invest in any, oil. I will not invest in anything. And yet they will have shares in Amazon. And it's a difficult thing, because you get like I forget the actual term for it. There's different portfolios that you can invest in, and people measure them differently. It's one of those things you take with a pinch of salt to really understand, why has that company been put in that box? What's it demonstrated? If ethical investment is something that's really important to you, then yeah, you can actually, so many people, the demand for where to put money, your pension, the demand for, which is one of the reasons, the work that I did with the ICE, because they're a charity and they have members. And so you're thinking, you're civil engineering, what should you be investing in? There are rules, because they're a charity. What can you not invest in? What will your members really not want you investing in? And it's like, it's a huge thing. It just depends on where you decide to draw the line. It's an individual and personal choice. But the reporting side of it, you'll find that getting that consistency in reporting around TCFD is gaining traction. They really want to make that a global standard for reporting. Once that's done, the comparison of like to like will be a lot more easy. At the moment, yeah, but everybody is moving in that direction. Everybody is coming up with their ESG statement. Everybody is really working hard to be seen as a responsible employer, somebody, a company that somebody can invest in with confidence. Yeah, there's quite a lot. We can have a good conversation about this, but maybe privately. I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but yeah, we can.
I just say AFB doesn't offer financial advice, so invest in your own. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, don't.
But let me just, what are my questions got? Okay, so let me see. Okay. Okay, I got one. Have you got any advice for a student looking to enter into the field of energy transition? For example, what companies can we apply to? Should we be looking at applying to consulting/regulatory companies if you really want to make a change?
Again, it goes back to that, little thing that I drew earlier. It's understanding where you see your career, okay? You could go work for, your BP Shells. They are energy companies now. They're transitioning. They're doing some work. You can go and work for some of the companies that are trying to do stuff around, hydrogen energy. There's so much. Or you could be thinking, actually, I want to go work for Bays because I want to be looking, just looking at it holistically from a high level policy perspective. It depends on what you want to do with your career and your strengths are. Do you want to do the technical design? Do you want to do, it depends. I'll be more than happy for me to have a nice sort of like, career chat with whoever asked that question to really break it down for them properly so that maybe we can look at some of the stuff that they've studied, their strengths, and I can see who I know in my network to introduce you to have some of these conversations, because it pays to speak to as many people in some of these sectors that you think you're interested in so that you really know. But if you're still quite young in your career, there's no risk in going to work for one of the large energy companies and learning as much as you can while you make up your mind, rather than kind of like funneling yourself down a very narrow path. So more than happy, my details are there, more than happy for that person to get in touch with me and we can talk about it.
We'll put your details back up there just in case anyone is interested in connecting. And I think I guess last question, this is for me personally. Out of all the companies that you've seen or heard of, what companies, or there might be a few, do you think are, really doing the biggest hitters when it comes to reaching net zero? Or, what companies comes to mind? You think, okay, these companies are really doing the right job, and what are they doing that's make you say they are doing it correctly?
I'm always really impressed by Mace, weirdly enough, because either they have some great presenters and they have a slick website because they've made the public declaration in terms of where they're going to get to in net zero. And also Mott McDonald's is another one. I think Mace and Mott McDonald's, they've made public statements about where they're going to get to. They have the data on their website so you can actually see how they're performing. They've taken that transparency stance in terms of who they are as a firm and what they're trying to do to such an admirable level that other people, they're still in that sort of like zone of defining the baseline before they can actually go out there and say, yeah, this is the hill I'm going to die on. So just because somebody isn't talking about it, it doesn't mean they're not green. It just means they're at a different stage in their sort of in their journey. So talk to them, find out what they're trying to do, and also talk to people that work for some of those companies to really understand. And as I said before, there isn't like particular jobs that will say, this is a net zero job. I think in everything that we do, if you're making efficiencies, if you're savings, you're contributing towards the whole of us, all of us using less. But if you want to do something more targeted, then think about what it is that you might want to do. And then we could be like, okay, if that is definitely what you want to do, these are the 3 or 4 people that I think you need to speak with. And again, Noah, I'm happy to put you in touch with quite a few of those people, to just be like, because that's how I make up my mind about things. I have so many people who introduce me to so many people, and then I speak to those people, and then I'm like, okay, thank you for your candid, opinion of how things really are and where you're going as an organization. It's good to have those conversations with the right people at the right level, so you actually get the true picture before you commit.
That makes a lot of sense. And I will be getting in touch because I have a few more questions as well, but we have run out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much. I've learned. I don't know about everyone else, but I know I've learned a lot. So
I'm pleased you
I
have.
really, yeah, I really appreciate it. So I'm just gonna we're gonna end the session here. I just have a few announcements to make for AFB. So we have a negotiation chess club taking place on the 10th of July. So anyone who's interested, that'll be a very good event. Negotiation is hard. You know, a lot of people find it awkward and it's not really something that everyone does on a normal day. So it'll be good if you want to learn how to improve your negotiation skills, please do attend that event. And there's another Real Projects event on project management, understanding team dynamics, and that will be held on the 22nd of July. Registration details will be available on the website soon. Again, I've been doing project management now myself. Absolutely hate it, but it's good to go and get as much advice as possible and learn how to. Even if you don't like it, it's good to know how to be the best you could be at whatever job you're doing. So these events are there, and you can learn something really important from somebody who's in a position that you want to be. So yeah, those events will be on the website, so please attend if you can. And again, Blessing, thank you very much. You got quite a nice positive comments in the chat, so I think a lot of people are pleased. So again, thank you so much, Blessing, and your details are there on the screen. So let me take a screenshot. We'll probably push your details to everyone as well. If that helps if anyone wants Blessing details, we can send that out as well. But yeah, I was gonna say thank you all for attending the event. I hope you all learned something, and have a good evening. So yeah, goodbye everyone.